Wind and Truth has released two divisive reviews.
Perhaps the most disappointing book that I've ever read in my life.
I am so completely satisfied with the ending of Wind and Truth.
This is it for me, for the Cosmere. I am done.
In this video, I'll be meeting with multiple content creators to help me discuss the question, what the heck went wrong with Wind and Truth? Hello World Hoppers, welcome to Cosmere Horizons, your one-stop shop for everything Cosmere. This video is not a negative space to bash the book into oblivion. On the other side, it's also not a positive place to overly glorify this book. The fact of the matter is, it's controversial and it's definitely not perfect, but it's also not a horrible piece of trash, which I understand some people are gonna disagree with that. The point of this video is to come together to discuss what didn't work in the book, why it didn't work that way, and hopefully just to be able to process things a little bit better. This is also my first time recording anything over Zoom, so the quality might not be great. I'm sorry. This comment section is gonna be an absolute nightmare, and I am so ready for it. All right. With that said, let's just get right into it. All right, and to start us off with this spoiler deep dive into Wind and Truth and what went wrong, we got Jaden and Marty from Next Chapter. Thank you guys so much for coming on to the episode. I'm more than stoked to have you here. And what would you guys like to start our discussion off with?
Sir, first of all, we are way honored to be on your show. Dylan,
blast.
it has been amazing to watch you just absolutely explode from just ground zero just a month ago. So a huge congrats to you.
And do we have some things to talk about? Absolutely. I don't know if you see, if people watching have seen our video on this specifically, but it was one of those things where we have feedback. We have a list of feedback.
We do. We have feedback. We have disappointments. But here's the thing is like we have disappointments, but we don't hate Sanderson or anything. That needs to come out right at the beginning. I am still a massive Sanderson fan. But I think our number one feedback that we wanted to mention today is that Sanderson is the Sander-lanch conclusion guy. That is what he is known for. That is what his books are known for. You can tell every single person, it's a slow book. Yes, but it's worth it in the end.
It's always worth it.
Always worth it. And this book did not quite meet that expectation, which was just heartbreaking for me.
For sure. Yeah. And we'll definitely deep dive into that in a little bit here, but I definitely agree with you, especially looking at Oathbringer, I feel like is the best pinnacle example of a slow burn to an insane conclusion. And it's like, I know it's journey before destination, but honestly, for the most part, it's destination before journey with some of these books before. I'm just saying I like this.
Well, you're right.
A lot.
Good.
Yeah.
I think Dalinar even says that the journey is just as important as the destination. Like, doesn't he say something like that in Wind and
going
Truth?
in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, now I'm like forgetting if it was
But it's
Dalinar.
part of that
But
payoff.
someone says that in this book specifically that the journey is extremely important.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So anyway, going into the Sander-lanch is the biggest thing that didn't work for me with the Sander-lanch, and I'm actually really excited to see what didn't work with you with the Sander-lanch is in Oathbringer, you know how everyone comes in together? Like that's my favorite Sander-lanch is the end of Oathbringer. You know, you literally have Kaladin, Adolin, Shallan, Navani, Yasna, Dalinar, Amaram, everyone's there, and it gets crazy. You have like the spear that would not break line. You have all these crazy one-laners. You cannot have my pain. Like it's insane. Like that's the Sander-lanch I wanted with Wind and Truth. I'm gonna be honest. And for the Sander-lanch, no one was together. You had Adolin and Azimir still, Kaladin and Szeth in Shinovar still. You had Dalinar in Urithiru, and they weren't all together. And that's at least where it didn't work for me.
I think you touched on the thing that I was going to say as well. It really doesn't come together in like this huge swell of emotion because, I mean, yeah, the spear that would not break, all those things, just you get the chills when you hear that because you remember how impactful that moment was when it hit. And everyone was fighting, there was intensity. And even, I will mention, the switching of perspectives that happened in those Sander-lanches didn't matter because everyone was fighting, everything was intense, and you almost wanted to switch around to see what was going on because so much was happening at the same time. Contrasting to this, I feel like everyone kind of resolved their own storylines on their own in different places, and it didn't feel like a culmination. It felt like an end. And I think that's a big difference where you're like, all this whole journey there's the payoff that makes the thing worth it. And I would even say that's a pattern throughout the entire book. There were little mini payoffs that didn't really hit the way I wanted them to.
Yeah, I think I agree with that completely. And one of the things about authors and writing is they make a lot of unspoken promises about how books should end. And this book all of Sanderson's book have that unspoken promise of I'm going to have this finale that brings everyone together, and you almost expect it. You're like, I read all these books, I know how these books end, and Sanderson always takes that and goes, yes, I know how you think this is going to end, and I'm going to twist it in a way to make it slightly different that makes it something completely out of left field, but something you can really enjoy. And this one, I feel like just missed on that part, because instead of giving us the expectation in the finale that we all expected, he went completely out of left field, but it still didn't fulfill the promise. Whereas in the past, he's been able to still fulfill those promises while also giving you the big like twist that you didn't expect.
Absolutely. And I know there was some conversation, I want to say weeks or months before the book came out, that he had tested multiple different endings, multiple different conclusions in Sander-lanches with beta reading audiences. And he had come up with the one that he thinks like blended them all perfectly together. I wonder if that blend just everyone just saw it as a blend. Like this kind of just feels like multiple different endings. There's no one ending that kind of like makes like a centerpiece of how this book ends. And I'm curious if he'll ever release the alternate endings.
Oh, that would be so good.
I
would read them. I would totally want to see.
It'd be an interesting.
Like I want to see that too. Yeah, 100%.
I'd be into that, like a Prime style when he has the Dragonsteel Prime, you just release alternate endings.
They've got to be out there, right? With the ARC copies, like maybe not the exact ARC copies, but people have them. People were the beta readers.
I don't know what the NDAs look like for people, but I highly doubt they can have that conversation.
That's true. That's true.
Readers, but yeah, that would be an interesting way to go for Sanderson if they end up releasing those.
For sure, yeah. No, that would actually, I really want to see that. And like, I want to know what the beta readers were thinking, reading Wind and Truth, and be like, is this the direction he went with? And if they think it was better or worse, that's just, I don't know. I kind of want to talk with the beta readers. Not to destroy NDA confidentiality, but.
Yes.
Okay, so looking specifically at the end, like in the Sander-lanch, in the culmination at the end, what plot lines specifically, like if you're looking at. I didn't like that smile.
Sorry, finish the question.
No, like what plotline specifically didn't work for you, and if there were any that did, like what ones did work for you, and why did some work and some did not?
Okay, I'm going to start with the one that I think did not work, and I have specific reasons that I think it didn't that really bothered me in the moment, and that is Kaladin and Szeth in Kavar.
I was going to say the Kaladin thing as well.
Because they're literally probably my two favorite characters. I know there are a lot of fantastic characters, but they're my two favorite because of the different storylines and how like they're equally working so hard to become the most powerful people that they can within their own constraints of character and all that stuff. The issue that I had is in all of Sanderson's books, they have a massive challenge that they need to overcome. Like that overcoming of a challenge is what essentially levels them up and allows them to swear new ideals and become better versions of themselves. I don't consider the ideals to be like power creep. I think it's a good way to manage a magic system. But my issue is instead of them rising to the occasion, I feel like what happened in the end is their enemies just kind of faded. And like that doesn't feel like a win. Like and specifically, and I know we're all spoiler in this book. It's the end of the book. But like with Nail kind of just ending the fight by being like, oh, never mind, I'm the worst. I'm just gonna cry for the rest of the book. And then you've got even the final battle was just, oh, it's just a test. All these guys are just going to beat up on you for a little while to prove that you can lose, and then it's going to be over. Like, that's not a final battle with everyone using all their powers and being creative. And he just spent the whole time like on the floor, huddled up, getting kicked a bunch of times. Like that just really let me down because I didn't feel like they got to experience growth and change. They both sweared the fifth ideal because their enemies were kind of just like significantly lower powered than they should have been in a culmination fight and event. So that for me was like, you can't resolve it by just making the problem easier.
Yep. It's the whole book built up to Kaladin becoming more and more powerful, this incredible fighter. And we did not get to really see him fight once except for against Nail. And he got his like butt kicked.
He fought with his flute.
Yeah, he fought with his flute. But
which
I understand the part of the story, but like again, we've heard that story before that he like that's been told about like the flute by Wit and everything, and I don't know, it just felt really repetitive. So again, promise is broken. You're expecting to see Kaladin have an incredible fight at the end, to be able to step in and help Szeth, or to have again the other side with Dalinar. We have been expecting to see Dalinar. This whole book, I was expecting he's going to start figuring out some cool bondsmith stuff that's going to help him at the end.
Yeah.
I have been so excited about that. Promises broken again. And sure, we'll get them in the next 5 books. Everyone's going to say, well, it's not really the end of the series. He did say this is the end of an arc, and we would get a good conclusion for this.
And you expect your socks to be blown off, right? You know,
Yes.
they're still good endings, and they're written well, and there are some moments, and I'm like, wow, that was powerful.
Yes.
But it's not knock my socks off powerful.
Yeah.
And like I think that makes a big difference in this case.
To me, it was more the idea of the conclusion that I was more excited about than the actual presentation. Like, I think the idea that Retribution is now the god with odium and honor together, that is sick. That's
really cool. Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah.
That honestly,
sure feels
this
awesome.
book, like with it dragging on and the Sander-lanch, I was starting to feel like, man, like that's a lot of time invested for this kind of Sander-lanch, and like it just feels deflating. Like
I hear that.
that's the time that you need invested. But that finish makes me curious enough to know that I will want to continue reading the next 5.
See what happens.
Like see what happens. It's cool. It's really cool.
And I will say, especially in regards with the Szeth and Kaladin plotline, there are parts of that Sander-lanch that did work for me. Like Szeth skipping the 4th ideal to go to the 5th one. That I had a oh my gosh moment like while I was reading that, when like similar to the first 4 books. Like that really worked for me. And I do wish we would have got a little bit more Kaladin fighting. I understand the whole point of this book is he's in his therapist arc or whatever. I can't wait for back half Kaladin, where he's the herald and the therapist, and we get the best of both worlds. I'm really hoping he needs to pick up the spear again. But I will say, it was for me him going and picking up, or when he was like, when everyone was feeling really bad, Nail was feeling bad, Syl was feeling bad, like connected to Ishar, like that part of the Sander-lanch worked. I kind of forget the heralds, not the heralds, the honor bearers. I forget they were there, I'm going to be honest. And that was a fight that I was really looking forward to. And like, I felt like it kept building up. There's going to be a huge physical confrontation. And Nightblood picking up the surges were pretty cool. But like, I don't know. To me, the Sander-lanch was, for that plot line, was Szeth skipping the ideal, which was cool. I'm not going to lie. I
agree. I like that part actually.
Yeah.
As well,
Oh, yeah.
And for him to turn around and renounce his oath right away. That was actually like, whoa, like what's going on? Like I thought that was cool.
That rubbed me the wrong way, I'm going to be honest.
You did like that?
Well, because Sigil just did it. Dalinar's about to do it, and like Sigil's makes sense to me, Dalinar's makes sense to me, and I'm like, Szeth, no, you could have done like one cool thing before you did that.
At least see like what you could do with it. That's funny. That's funny.
And then he was like, no. Like I would have loved for that to happen like in the last chapter, not like 2 pages later. Anyway.
True. Like kick everyone's butt first and then renounce your oaths, right?
From a position of power, not a position of confusion.
Yeah. So you agree with the Ishar saying that was the dumbest thing he could have done?
I'm with the Ishar. I'm sitting right next to him. But I wasn't going. What do you guys think of the line when Kaladin was like, "I'm his therapist"?
No, dude, so cringy. I hated that. That was a Marvel moment. Like where there's cringy lines that you're like, oh, come on, dude. I know you're expecting it to be this cool pan. It's like showing like hero focus up on him and just like, I'm his therapist to like kind of be, I don't know. It killed me.
No.
Like it could have been to the same level. Like it had the buildup of when they're all like Nail's feeling the depression, Syl is, Szeth is, and then Kaladin stands up. Great lesson, great moment. I can feel the excitement building, and then just I don't know. And then I'm a therapist.
Okay, wait, we lost you for a second.
Oh yeah,
you said it. You were saying that it had the buildup, and then
it just kind of like I don't know.
Yes.
In the Kaladin's 5th ideal, it didn't feel like he was learning that lesson through the book. Like you know, his 5th ideal is I will protect myself so I can continue to protect others. Him protecting himself wasn't an issue he had this book.
He wasn't learning that from his experience.
How do you feel
just
about
kind
that?
of knew it?
Yeah. Did you have more thoughts on
that?
that?
No, I think that was exactly the thing for me. We talked a little bit in the other videos. Like the actual oaths themselves were odd to me in many cases. Like with Dalinar, with I understand you being like the big oath, and then even the 5th ideal for Kaladin and Szeth, I was like, it just doesn't feel like wow, like that makes sense. It really connects with this crazy experience he's had, or
Yeah.
this new challenge he has to take on. Like he's really accepting something about the world. It just didn't feel like that. It felt like
Well,
they were kind of just
and they've always,
emptier.
in the past books, they've always been really emotional moments
Oh yeah.
where you've really connected. You're like, yes, this is what the person needs to understand. Even the moment when Lopin finds his next ideal,
That was one of the
you're
best.
like, it's a good one. It's not like
Yeah.
emotional cry. It's like emotional, like, oh yeah, like that just fits. It's
Feels like
perfect.
growth. You're like, that makes so much sense. He is at the next level because he recognizes that about himself and the world.
Mhm.
But it's like, yeah, I don't know. It just
Yeah.
did not, it did, like exactly like you said, it fell a little flat.
For sure. Were there any points of the Sander-lanch that did work for you? I guess there's really only Azimir. Well, there's a couple other plot lines
Well, I
that.
was going to say that. Well, I was going to say the closest for me that we got to a really solid conclusion was probably Adolin's, where
Mhm.
he gets to have a moment of like, I can triumph without needing to just become a part of what everyone else is doing. Because what he is really good at is his own version, like the promise is kept and like all those things that are important to him. He got to not only keep that element of himself, but he also got to take it to, I would say, the next level and become what did you call him? The
Uh, unoathed.
Unoathed.
unoathed. Yes, I was
Yeah.
gonna say
Yeah.
unbonded, but yeah, unoathed, and then like they get to have that position of authority, power, strength with the bonds that they now have. I think that
Yes.
was cool. I think it was the most potential. I don't think he absolutely nailed it. I had some issues with like the final fight and stuff, but I do think that it was the closest.
I loved it. I loved the Adolin part. I love the part as he's fighting through the night, trying to survive like on his own. It,
Yes.
That's my
it
favorite
felt
part of
like
the
the
book.
bridge
That's my
runs.
favorite part of the book.
Love that. That was
Very raw.
That was
Yeah.
very Sanderson, very put you in despair moment.
Yep.
And then the moment that with when they become, he gets the shard blade and the armor, and then they all get the armor. That was the closest to an emotional moment that I've had in the book, like out of that book compared to all the other books. It's just I loved that moment. Like this is the coolest moment. I'm getting chills. Like I'm
Yeah.
like this is just awesome, awesome
sure.
moment. The other one though, I would say, and we did slam it a little bit, just because we slammed it in our review just because we thought there was too many characters and we could have done without characters like perspectives like Yasna, maybe throw her in the back end of the book. However, I actually really did love her ending for this book. Her whole conversations with Odium and her fight with Odium on like where she comes to the realization that the most good is not always the right answer. And that was such a cool like moral like dilemma that she had to go through, that she had throughout the entire series, and had to confront and realize that she had been wrong, which was crazy.
That is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really love that.
Yeah, and I touching on the Adolin and Yasna parts of the book is Adolin, yes, really worked for me, especially when we see him on the front lines with the pike, and I thought he was going to die in that scene, and he's like,
Yeah.
not till I see him again. Azimir was great. Azimir worked for me so well in this book.
Me too.
Yeah, and so we do like the book. Sorry, we should reiterate the well,
Yes.
I like the book. Yeah, like it's
Yes, we love Sanderson. We love the Stormlight Archive.
Yes.
Yeah.
A 7.5 out of 10 was our review. That's not
It's still a recommend.
that's a still recommend. Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
not a full, this is something that's going to blow your mind. If
For
you're
sure.
if you're already reading Stormlight Archive and you love it, you will like this book, I think,
Yeah.
generally. But I think that, it's
Yeah.
one of those things where the hype gets so high, the expectations go along with it, and then it's difficult to
then
meet that.
It feels a lot more
Yeah.
like a middle book than a final book.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, which I mean, it is a middle book, but he told us it was going to be a final book.
With no, that's a good point. With the Yasna part though, sorry not to tie it back, but
You're good.
sorry, there's an ambulance going by outside. The with the Yasna part, I definitely see, like people online are getting like angry, or it's like a 50-50 split. Half the people love it, half don't. The only thing that pulls me out of it is when Odium was like, "Remember when you signed this contract that said I want to assassinate this person?" Like you don't. I feel like you don't sign your name on something that's illegal. But other than that, it did work for me. The Yasna debate did work for me, and especially where it puts her for the future of her realizing her's wrong, and she's just depressed the rest of the book, and there's not a resolution to that. Like I really dug that part of it as well. The last question I want to ask for you guys is why did certain aspects like the Adolin arc and Azimir work at least better than, let's say, the culmination at the contest or the culmination in Shinovar. And is there a difference in your mind, or what's the difference, let's say, between the culminations of this that didn't work versus culminations of other books or things in this book that did work well?
Well, I would say I would give it to maybe the difference between a wit story and a story that like anyone else could make up, right? The way that wit is able to convey a story adds so much real, relatable tension and intensity and difficulty. And then it allows you to be in that story, stay in that story, and feel like you're in that pit of despair with them. And you're
Yeah.
able to crawl out because of these solutions and resolutions and just excitement and intensity. I think, like, we're talking about Kaladin, right? Or talking about even the Contest of Champions, where it's like you have the story, you're being told the story, but you don't feel like you're in that same struggle, in that same moment. It's being broken up by jokes about therapy, or jokes about all these other things, and you just that takes you away from that emotional moment. Whereas when Adolin's fighting on the front lines, there were no witty one-liners. It was, he could not survive this, but because of who he is, because of the character he has built over 4 books and thousands of pages, he will not give up. There is no chance. He will be there until he dies. And you know that, and you feel that. I think that's so, so powerful. And that is what makes that storyline so much better in my mind.
Yeah, mine's a lot of the same feedback as Jaden. Sanderson, up to this point, he has been a master of character development. And that's what makes me love his books. You are able to connect with his characters in a way that is super deep. You're learning. We've always said that these books are almost like self-help books, in a way. This book, it kind of feel like he leaned into it so much that he forgot that he wants characters with his self-help book instead of just people like reading a self-help book to you. But he is really good at that. And the Adolin book part hits that, where he's teaching Yanagon. Is it Yanagon?
Yeah, because he cares. Yeah,
he's teaching him about how to play towers, and he's teaching him how to use the plate, and he's going through experiences of teaching other people how to be warriors, and has really cool leadership moments. And then Dalinar on the other end is like, he's just having a lot of things like, yeah, I regret a lot of the things that I did in the past. Even some of his coolest moments where, like, I personally love the moment when he beats up Elhokar and like and threatens him and says like, he's like, you're being a bad king. And like, that's a yes moment. Everyone was wanting that. And then you get to this part of the book and he's walking that back, and you're like, wait, like, I don't think all of those things that you were doing, there was good reasons for that. I don't know. It was just super hard to connect with him.
The characters didn't flow as well.
The characters, and so it was just harder
for sure. And I really like the points that you guys brought up of Jaden, especially the comparison of wit telling a story versus anyone telling a story. That like weirdly clicked in my mind. Like that worked. Like that's I 100% get what you're saying there, and I definitely get that. And with the Dalinar thing is, Marty, what you made me realize is, in the end of Adolin's arc, he learned something in Azamir, and there was a culmination to his story. And when I look at the ending of Dalinar's story, and when I look at the end of Kaladin's story, versus Zeth's story did work for me, and we learn about how he's been passed around his whole life to him becoming the law, like that works for me. But when we're looking at Kaladin, when we're looking at Dalinar, this feels like a great art wrap up to their arc through these books. But what happened in Wind and Truth to aid to their arc? There's a... Like when Kaladin's walking through all the versions of himself that got him to who he is today to become the Herald, he doesn't mention who he was in Wind and Truth, and that really stuck out to me. Like
that was a really good point.
Yeah, I was like, so what have we been doing the past 1300 pages? So
it's got to come a little bit because he was trying to cram like a 1,400 page book into 10 days. Like that's how much character like growth can you do in 10 days? I kind of wonder if he was experimenting with that. He clearly was. Can I write a huge book with just 10 days? And I wonder if that contributed at all to that.
Yeah. But it's a big part of what makes his books so incredible. And that's what everyone was expecting. Like you said, unspoken promises, right? I think that's a good one.
Yeah, no, and that's really good. Well, Jaden and Marty, thank you so much for coming on to the episode. It's been an absolute joy to have you. Thank you.
Absolutely great to be here. Thanks so much.
Been an honor.
Okay, so next up I'm here with Austin and Richard from Two to Ramble, and they have a couple things to say about the prose of Wind and Truth.
A couple things? There's more than a couple things, Dylan. It's more than 3. It's more than 3.
Okay, because I only have 3 things to say. So
we would love to hear your 3 things on what. So the issues with Wind and Truth's prose. What were the 3 things?
I like you come right out of the gate. Not things to talk about the prose. It's just the issues.
No,
come on.
Come on.
Even assuming that there's like positive, just issues with it. Okay.
Yeah. So the thing about this awful prose. No, so the main thing for me that like I'm just gonna start off with my really big thing is there felt like a lot of it was telling instead of showing in the book, and it seemed like more than previous Sanderson that I've read, being like the rest of this shelf. I feel like in especially like the Kaladin therapy chapters, or even just in majority of the chapters, it felt like not only was it telling me what happened to them, but why what happened made them feel that way, and that made them feel that way because of this, and that is going to make them react this way. I don't know. I just feel like there was a paragraph to explain when like we kind of understand how human emotions work as humans. So there was that part of it that dragged on me a little bit. I did feel throughout my read.
Yeah, I like that you pointed out your shelf, because we are Sanderson fans too. You can see we have so much of Sanderson stuff. This is coming from a place of love of why we hate
how much
of
did
this as well.
How much did that statue thing cost for
Too
us?
much.
A lot of money.
But you make a good point, Dylan, because even looking at one of the lines that sticks out in my head with Kaladin and Zeth in the scene, where one of the many scenes where they're talking about their feelings, is Kaladin straight up asks Zeth, "How do you feel?" And Zeth asks back, "Well, how do you feel?" And their feelings are explained and kind of told to us, rather than seeing how their relationship develops over the course of the book. We're just constantly given dialogue tags, and then they express their thoughts. It's like, okay, that's how
in a
they
perfectly
feel.
succinct way. Like Kaladin asks Zeth, "Well, how do you feel?" And after maybe a day of trying to break down Zeth's walls, Zeth just says, "I feel terrible, and I can't stop feeling terrible."
Yeah.
Kaladin, how do you feel? "I actually feel better." "Oh, that's nice. All right, let's keep going."
I mean, you even in the
all
first
right.
part, how many times did Kaladin tell us, like, "Hey, he feels great. He feels awesome. He's feeling." And so there was a lot of that. Though, did that bug you too, or is that us just being, because we can say some good things too, but did that bother you?
Yeah. So certain times it bothered me more than it did for others, especially when it was like the inner monologue. That's when it really dragged out for me. I think I remember that exact scene, like with Kaladin and Zeth. I think it's like day 5. It's like halfway through the book. And he's like, "What do you want?" or something like that. He's like, "I want to stop hurting," or something like that. And I'm not going to lie, I liked the one-line delivery of that, but I didn't like the 3 paragraphs after that felt like it explained it all out for me. Like I would have loved to see like "I'm hurting," and Kaladin being like, "Well, crap, I'm new to therapy. I don't know how to do this." Like that would have, I feel like, clicked more in my brain.
Yeah, rather than just reading off, Kaladin reading off the DSM-5 to Zeth over and over.
He did feel like he had this down from page 1. He knew exactly the right words to say and how to handle it. It was just, notice that too. Was it? So that was your only issue with the prose? Only one issue so far?
Well, actually, now that you mention it, there was also a lot of modernisms that I haven't noticed before. And it might have been in there before, but if you take a look at Rhythm of War to Wind and Truth, in world, that's like a day, actually. It's like literally...
It's literally the next day.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I feel like a day is a weird amount of time for the world to adjust to using the words of, instead of courting, using dating. Like when Adolin said, like, or when Maya was like, "Have you dated her before?" Like that kind of threw me out of whack. I don't know. And it was like, one of the guys on the Shattered Plains, I think it was Leighton, I don't remember who, they were like, "Dalinar's just goobering around at Uruthiru." And I was like,
I can't believe I missed that. He said goobering.
He said goobering. How did you miss that?
I might have zoned out by that one. No, he said goobering.
He did say goobering. It was
it felt like Lift's dialogue and Lift's style of humor was then just spread to every character. And I'm a Lift defender. I like Lift. I'm a fan of her character. It's fun when she's on the page.
She's a reprieve.
Like, it was funny having Lift in, like, sometimes a really dense moment, or like we're having a moment with Dalinar and the moment's done. We're past that. Dalinar and Lift was always kind of a funny combo to have every once in a while. It's funny. The whole book, no, it's a bit much. It's a bit much for me. Yeah. But yeah, no, the modernisms really frustrated me in the sense of I don't think it was particularly a mistake. I think Sanderson's talked about that this has been pretty deliberate, but I think he just jumped the gun. I know that this is where he wants to go. That he's talked about on like Reddit and everywhere else, where Stormlight is a translation from the Rosharan language into English, and so he said like it makes sense for English phrases would come through, and like that's the point of it. Yeah, it's not supposed to have all these fancy terms. Yeah. Well, the problem is he didn't set it up that way. It was, the very previous book had different terms. And now we go to this. You compare that to something like Era 2 of Mistborn. Yeah. A lot of time has passed. And then you start the book, you set the tone. All right, we have some modern terms in there. That makes sense. It's hundreds of years in the future. Yeah. You can set it up however you like. But it wasn't set up with the fifth book.
That's actually a really good point, too. And that's actually kind of like I feel like if it's very valid for like Brandon being like, I'm going to want to go into this direction to be like, let's, put in some modern slang here, like evolution of language. Sure. I just feel like the book to do that is not the book that takes place canonically the day after the previous book. But instead, I don't know, maybe the next book, there'll be like a 10-year time gap or something. Maybe then at least try to do a little slower transition. I don't know. I feel like I actually really like that point you bring up of not a horrible idea, but not so soon. Like 10 days later, the language shouldn't evolve that quickly.
There's also a difference with, at least how I felt with Era 2's prose and language, is it definitely felt more modern, but was modern for Mistborn. You know what I mean? It was a mix of modern lingo and the lingo on Scadrial. Versus Stormlight 5 had just straight up modern lingo and modern phrases and modern jokes. It was this, you could take them out and it feels like, we're not on Roshar anymore. We're just on Earth. Yeah. That was the bigger problem for me.
That modernism was like a prose and world issue, because when words like therapist being used, words like racist were being used. Those are things that obviously are real in the real world, but then I know it's like a light eyes versus dark eyes thing in the Rosharian system. And it's also like therapy. I just wouldn't think they had developed, like knew a lot about therapy.
Well, they talked about how the word therapist was new. Like that's what Wit brought. Wit said like, you guys don't have therapists. And Carolyn's like, well, what's that? It's like, well, yeah, you guys don't have that here yet.
Right.
You're going to be
What do you guys think of the line when the epic mic drop moment when Kaladin was like, I'm his therapist?
I guess that's what I'm remembering. That one.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Just talk about just real lame. At a certain point and this is, I guess, more character stuff, but I'll mention it, is Kaladin's journey is enthralling, and I think as an endpoint of him being a therapist makes sense. However, to get the full book, like the final book with him, and it feels like we just got to see an extended epilogue. Like I don't need to see this part of his journey. This is he goes off into the sunset and becomes a therapist. Seeing him actually do it.
I think the real problem with it, though, is he didn't even have the journey. Like from page 1, he was okay and like doing good therapy. I don't think he had to learn by the end. Like, here's my fifth ideal.
Maybe that would have been better if you developed it.
Well, from the get-go, if he was more flawed and didn't actually know how to help Zeth and was like frustrated by it. No, he was saying all the right things. He was doing all the right things. He also felt great. And then at the end, your revelation is based on, you could have also said that at page 1. I didn't feel that growth with Kaladin because it already felt like he was figured out by page 1. So I'm just sitting there just wanting.
Well, that's
a
problem with this. Is a prose issue that I had. Part of the dialogue with the entire book, and this happened to nearly every single character, is all the characters' inner monologues were so hyper self-aware of they knew exactly how they felt.
That's part of Dylan's point.
Then expressed it in precise words of exactly how you feel. I'm going, that's kind of boring. It's real boring in the sense of they all understand themselves so well that there's no room for personality or them being wrong or them kind of to develop on who they are. If they already know who they are from the beginning of the book, it's what are they supposed to discover?
I think actually a really great point connected to that is I see a lot of people online like bashing like Brandon Sanderson doesn't understand other than textbook level like depression, like very like, you know, how it's very textbook, very basic understanding, not understanding the nuance and complexity. And I think that comes from it explaining it down to the sentence, is what I realize. Like that's where my brain goes when I'm like, the reason is it seems so textbook and so juvenile is because one, he might not have experienced all these things firsthand. And so because of that, he is researching, he's reading these textbooks, but then he wants everybody to understand the exact same way. And so because of that, it's sentence of how this person's feeling. This is how that person's feeling. This is how the person that's feeling. Instead of just like letting it breathe in a certain way of letting people insert their own self-experiences and interpretation on the character, other than it's so broken down, which I think that's where the controversy of Brandon Sanderson not understanding depression and mental illness and all these other things, like that's where I'm seeing that come from. Almost.
He's admitted he has not really had depression, right? Because he said he doesn't feel those extreme emotions. He obviously felt fear sad, but I don't think the clinical word depression, don't want to completely put words in his mouth. That's from my understanding. But to go on that, even whether he has or hasn't, books 1 through 4, he deals with mental illnesses phenomenally. The way he handles it in Rhythm of War, just having Wit tell Kaladin the story about the dog and the dragon is a beautiful way of just showing Kaladin why life is. You got a point. Keep going. That what he's trying to explain to Kaladin there is even you are just falling short of your own expectations. You've still done so much help in this world. You're your greatest enemy right now. So he teaches Kaladin that lesson without the heavy-handed insert inner monologue that we see in Wind and Truth. From book 1, Life is Priceless, seeing that with Dalinar showing and proving Kaladin wrong about Light Eyes, and Kaladin actually believing that life is not worth living and teaching us the lesson that it is. And then book 2, teaching that, yes, you'll protect those, even the ones that you hate, even those people's lives are priceless. Handles mental illness, depression great throughout. And something here, just what we're trying to get into, like, is it one? Is it the fact that the editor changed? Is it the fact that we could try to figure it out? Here's
something that I don't think this is unique to the 5th book, but at least it stood out to me. There was Brand Sanderson mentioned, especially in this book, that he had sensitivity writers to make sure he gets representation and mental illness done correctly. Part of the thing that felt jarring for this book and the writing of it, I think Sanderson was almost afraid for characters to display mental illness imperfectly or just wrong, or think a wrong thought about it, because that jarred me a lot. Is every character that was both experiencing the problem, understood it, and like was experiencing an emotion, said it through the book, then dialogue, this is how I feel, and I know these thoughts are wrong. Every character was doing
self-aware of the flaw.
On top of that, every surrounding character was perfectly understanding. Everyone is so accommodating and is treating each person the exact right way that you should be treated, and with compassion, understand to a certain point of like, none of these people are characters now. They're all the same. There's no uniqueness. There's no Lopin doing a weird thing, like explaining himself in a weird way that maybe is misconstrued. Yeah. But the fact that every character felt the same, and it, to me, it's more like a sense of, I can very easily see a sensitivity writer coming into one of the characters' lines and going, hey, that's not exactly how it's should be felt and should be expressed, and that's kind of wrong. And Sanderson changing it to be right, but then again, now it's uniform.
Do we know if he's had sensitivity writers before this book?
I'm pretty sure, but I don't think he's had them throughout all the books. I know that. Like, I don't think he's gotten to that point. But
so you're trying to dissect, like, why did it go wrong this book?
Yeah, exactly.
You're just trying to figure out.
I'm just looking at how none of the characters express themselves in a slightly deviant way, express themselves in a way that can be misconstrued. It was just so clear that it got boring.
Another hypothesis, and Dylan, tell me what you think on this, because I think for 4 books, Kaladin's been going through the ringer. I think for 4 books, Shallan's been going through the ringer. And I don't know whether he was listening to the public or that he did say this is the story he wanted to tell. So I'll give all credit and not say he was unduly influenced, because he says he stands by his decisions. So I'll look at his decision of being, okay, maybe he saw Kaladin was for 4 books so unhappy and depressed and wanted 1 book to give the readers and give this fulfillment of like, look, he's okay now. You get a whole book of like Kaladin's not depresso, and Shallan, she's kind of got things figured out, and like wanted to give like a book of more. You don't have to worry about that because we got the odium stuff going on. So maybe he just thought people would love that because I've had people were complaining after Rhythm of War of
I remember
Kaladin again, another depression arc with Kaladin. Come on, Sanderson, give us something different. He gave us something different. So, Dylan, what do you think? What's your theory on this?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. Of after Rhythm of War, there was a lot of Kaladin's like going through the same arc over and over. It feels like that. Even Shallan's got her multiple personalities, like, and they make big breakthroughs by the end of that book. That's very true and very evident.
Yeah.
But I do agree in the sense of, I think it could have been he was trying to go in like a different direction of let's see what our characters are like when they're happy. But then he made them all happy, like Richard was saying, without any flaws. And they all thought the same way and do the prose. And I love that point actually of it felt like what if our characters are happy?
Yeah.
But then we didn't see any of our, like, not even our side characters, like Renarin and Relaine were like kind of struggling in their own thing, but they were like literally isolated from society, so there's no societal pressures to.
I got one thing. I have one character that was the favorite in this book by far was Yesna, because she was shown her true character flaw against Odium. Like, hey, her selfishness came through, her failure came through. She built up all for 5 books. She's Yesna. She was one of the first Radiant. The 4th ideal before anybody else. She's so smart.
She's so smart. Everyone says she's the smartest.
She's the atheist who's smarter than everybody else. She's constantly, and then when it comes down to it, she fails because of her own. She actually just wanted her and her own family's greater good. That was beautifully done. I'm going like, yeah, Yesna, you're a real character. Your consequences to your actions. It was beautiful.
Yesna had
it was beautiful. Yes,
in this book,
give me that
something to learn.
Yeah,
the thing is, I don't know why like Kaladin can be happy in this book. If Sanderson wanted to write a happier Kaladin, but he could still be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he can have something he still needs to learn that doesn't require depression.
And still not know exactly what to say to respond to Zeth and Nail. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or maybe, and this is part of the language thing. I was talking with Andrew Givler from Give Reads about the dialogue with it, and kind of hoping or expecting that Kaladin's language when describing, if he's going to be a therapist, that he would describe it and he would diagnose things in his head in either of 2 ways, either as a soldier or as a surgeon, and would reference things in that way. The one example we had here was the warrior thoughts. So like, I have the bad thoughts and I have the warrior thoughts to battle it. Okay, that's something, but like more, rather than the DSM-5, give us a weird, twisted version of it. Give us something like Kaladin thinking like a surgeon, Kaladin thinking like a soldier, rather than just, oh, he's now a therapist with the right therapist words. But
no,
it's a Prose
absolutely great.
Until that was only your second issue with the Prose, isn't there a third?
Well, we touched on my second or my third one,
Okay.
and that was what differentiates it from books 1 through 4.
Got it. Got it.
Mm.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
definitely got into there with like the
Yep, yep.
sensitivity readers and stuff like that. Lastly, I'd like to touch on is there anything that because I know how much Richard loves Brandon Sanderson's prose.
Yeah.
He's been saying it since book 1. But is there any issues like with prose that we have not touched on that you would like to bring up, specifically prose related?
Oh, I will.
Oh no.
Length.
Yeah.
Why does this book have to be 1,300 goddamn pages long?
1329.
1329. No, it did not need to be. It unjustified. He is, at least in my eyes, Sanderson has lost his big book privileges. He has to go back down to the regular plebeian levels of maybe 1,000 pages. Can you get it done in 1,000 pages? I don't know. This book is so over-explained and ultimately feels like it's telling us a bunch of lore stuff with characters and storylines that I don't think really mattered, especially in this book. Of all, like Shallan, I'm now questioning everything with Shallan of why the hell was she here? Why the hell was she here in the entire series? For most of it, she could be cut out. She could be cut out of the entire Stormlight archive, and it doesn't really change much. Her whole thing was the Ghost Bloods, and then by the end, it's okay. Yeah, we'll tackle that later. They're not gonna hurt you. We've kind of figured it out, but it's kind of a non-ending with her and the Ghost Bloods. With by Ado Mishram, this whole setup, and now, oh wow, they released her. What's gonna happen? We'll find out next book. No, why'd we spend the whole damn book on this? Dalinar just having hey, what if Dalinar's entire storyline is just giving you guys lore? This is 1,300 pages and feels like it could have been 300 of actual plot. I find that ridiculous, and I don't know. I'm more and more dogmatic on my aversion to very, very long books.
Can I ask you each a question? What was your favorite scene Sanderson wrote here, prose wise? Does anything stick out to you? Do we have like Dylan? Do you have something that was like, you know what, he did that really well? He really killed it in that scene. It was the visuals, the writing. It was
In Wind and Truth or in
Wind and Truth? Yeah.
Actually,
Yes.
I do have one that sticks out to me.
Yes.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with Wind and Truth. But it is in Wind and Truth. But I loved it not because of Wind and Truth. It was when Kaladin was stepping through his different arcs. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Where it was right before he picked up the mantle of Herald. And he stepped through the boy he was as a surgeon, and then Amaram's army, and then he stepped through the person he was as a knight, or as Dalinar's like bodyguard, then as a Radiant. And it like summarized each of his arcs, or each like character arc he went on, and how it was a part of him, and how that's going to help him be a herald. And I didn't help but notice that his Wind and Truth arc wasn't on. He didn't step through that one, but that one did work.
That's actually good.
That did work for me. I will say, like prose wise. Just I remember, and he's like, for it was part of him. It like that kept being repeated over and over.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. That reminds me of a complaint. I'm so sorry. The complaint it reminds me of when you were saying, you know, he's talking back through his arcs. There was a lot of those moments where Kaladin repeated his honor his deadline. Dalinar repeated his uniting line. They kind of did the callbacks, which reminded me of like a more MCU style prose. And on top of that, which we didn't talk about humor. You talked about Lift, how the humor, went across other characters a little bit, but that's probably my final complaint on it is the MCUification of like the line moments, but also the humor moments of not even the words or modernity that we mentioned, more so the Syl crotch joke, the Lift goggling at men, which in a different book, or even in a different Sanderson book, those work better. But again, the tone being set in Roshar for being more epic fantasy and falling into YA, also humor being a little slapstick. And
Mike's book review said it best is like the trajectory of Stormlight Archive was hitting trying to hit a wider audience and going more YA
That's
in
what it felt
tone.
like. Yeah.
And he was stepping off the trains, going like, okay, wait, this is going a direction that not really for me anymore.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt the same way.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. And I definitely feel like with some of the humor and like undercutting those moments, like when Ishar was like, "What are you?" and he was like, "I'm his therapist," like could have been a great line. Like maybe not to the leagues of "You cannot have my pain," but maybe in the leagues of like Maya going "We chose," like something like that could have been an epic moment. And he's like, "I'm his therapist," and I'm like, oh God, I know it broke me. Yeah.
What would you give the book? Do you do a 5-star system, a 10 out of 10 points?
I can do a 5-star system. See,
yeah, what do you give it?
It'll be easier for me to tell you where it is and like where I place it in these books because I just
Okay.
Yeah. Where would you place it?
Would put it above Way of Kings.
Above Way of Kings.
What?
Wow. So it's 4th for you? Is Way of Kings last and this is 4th?
Really?
Rhythm of War, Way of Kings, Wind and Truth.
This is middle.
Yeah. Then Words of Radiance, Oathbringer.
Okay.
And I think
Man.
that's due to the fact that one, I'm going to be honest, I don't read many books outside of the Cosmere. So I don't have like a prestige for prose or like I get like I understand it's bad prose. Like it affected me and I don't care about prose. But the Adolin's arc and Zeth arc carries the book for me. And that's ultimately prose is not the reason it's in the middle. I can guarantee you that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll disagree, but you know what? Your name is Cosmere Horizons, so in a way, we're just the ramblers who go like, it's the worst book in the Stormlight Archive. You have the name in the title, but people should still listen to us. It's the worst book. However, we respect it. We respect it.
Yeah.
Do you respect it, Rich? I should.
No, I don't have to. What do we?
You have literally it twice on your set, and you were just telling all the copies you got.
Oh, we have like 5 copies because they sent us 2 arcs. We bought 3 of them.
We asked for an arc, like an early copy of it, but I don't think they were hand those out to just anybody.
Yeah, I misspoke. It's not an arc. It's a
just copy.
Review copy. Yeah.
And after we got back from Dragonsteel and after we finished the books, they came in. We're like,
after shitting on us too. Like, by the way, Dragonsteel, all of them are amazing people. Sanderson is one of the best guys out there. He's fantastic dude.
In terms
love all
of
Dragonsteel.
How he treats his business partners and just running conventions and how he treats his fans. Awesome.
Also has written some of my favorite books ever written. Like I'm Stormlight, like Oathbringer is one of my favorite books ever. Wait, where'd you put Oathbringer on your list?
Top.
Oh, we're back, baby. Yeah,
we're back.
We are back. Yes.
Actually, it was number 5. No, I'm kidding.
I would never.
Actually, crazy story. My girlfriend's dad, I got him on the Stormlight Archive. Yeah. He's been telling me about how much he loves Dalinar, and he's like halfway through it. He texts me like every night before bed. It's the funniest thing, and I can't wait for him to get to You Cannot Have My Pain. It's gonna be
That's gonna be awesome.
That's gonna be an epic.
Dalinar was my favorite in Way of Kings. So Rich kept telling me like, "Hey, I think I know what your favorite book will be," because I like Dalinar just in his side point of views throughout the first 2 books. He's awesome. So,
how much of a letdown was that of Dalinar Colin died and you didn't
care? Well, anyway, that's all time we got for today.
Thank you for having us on, Dylan. This is a lot of fun. I hope we didn't take too much of the. I know you got other guys.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
I also hope we didn't just bring down the mood for the rest of the video.
What if the prior clip was just of them going, "Yeah, you know, it has its flaws, but there's some really good aspects," and we just completely ruined the mood. But Dylan, thank you a bunch for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And talking about the prose of Wind and Truth and everything about that. And I realized a lot of good points about it. So anyway, thank you for coming on. Hey everyone, I just want to make 2 quick announcements. I have a trivia live stream tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And so feel free to hop onto that, play some trivia, talk with the community. Brandon Sanderson was there last time. So not to force you to come, but Brandon Sanderson was on the stream last time. Brandon Sanderson's in the chat! And next up, make sure to subscribe to everyone in this video, please. They're all amazing for being in this video. It means the world to me. All right, on to the next person. All right, so next up we have Cosmere Mo here from Cosmere Mo on Instagram, who posts everything, Instagram Reels, memes, and all the sorts Cosmere. And we're going to be talking about the emotional stakes of Wind and Truth and kind of how it compares to other books in the Stormlight Archive. So Mo, what are your thoughts on how it emotionally impacted you in Wind and Truth?
So Wind and Truth, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I did. But the emotional impact didn't quite hit me as hard as previous books. And there are a couple different reasons, and they're not necessarily like bad. It's just different. And I've really enjoyed kind of exploring a different perspective, a different kind of take on some of these characters. But one of the ones that stuck out to me the most was Therapist Kaladin. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I love Therapist Kaladin, but I fell in love with Captain Bridge 4 Slave Kaladin. And he's the one that I have really identified with throughout the series. And now he's not necessarily, he's still a little stressy, a little depressy, but he's Therapist Kaladin. He's further along in his healing process than what I've been able to relate to. So it was just kind of different to not have his big emotional moments where he's just completely lost in the darkness, mm-hmm. and then kind of comes out of it a little bit, but then he falls back in and he's in this cycle of frustration where he just can't get out of that, but he's still like so badass, and you're just like, oh my gosh, you're such an inspiration and you're so powerful, and I wish I was you, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't quite find that moment for me in this book.
Yeah. And what I also think is like really interesting too about like Therapist Kaladin is we got like a little bit of Therapist Kaladin in Rhythm of War before the tower got occupied, and then everything went to crap. And then he's like, you know what? I'm gonna put my therapist side of me on pause for a little bit while I don't die. And I really liked that little clip of like therapist, like him and Teft were going around, and I'm forgetting the guy that Teft. Oh, I forgot. Anyway,
right there.
I can't. Him and Teft were walking around and they were helping this war-shocked soldier or something like that. And I'm blanking on the guy's name. But it was like I loved seeing that. And I think what happened is the shift in here is it didn't feel like there was that external pressure of like the other things other than just Kaladin kind of figured it all out at the end of Rhythm of War, which is great. He had a big emotional breakthrough.
Yes.
But it was like his therapist arc led to the fifth ideal, which I don't think Kaladin's ever had an issue with the fifth ideal. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. There's never been like a bump.
Yeah. He never had a bump with like wanting to help or like wanting to protect himself. Like he was always hard on himself, but he really we've never seen an instance where he's wanted to harm himself for other people, like if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes. And so just seeing the Kaladin therapist arc. What'd you think of the fifth ideal, by the way?
Honestly, that one didn't hit quite as hard for me as the other ones did either. Like because of that, what you mentioned, he didn't have something in the way, kind of having to overcome something before he can achieve that. Like he was already there. He didn't have to do something crazy or have his brother visit him in the spiritual realm to like push him over the edge to be able to get to that point. So that one, that's one of my all-time favorite scenes.
That's one of my all-time favorite moments too.
I freaking love it. Which that's going to be really hard to beat, honestly. So having that ideal and then going to the one in Wind and Truth kind of wasn't like I wanted it to kind of top that a little bit, but it didn't. It was still good. Yeah. Like honestly, I'm really excited to see Herald Kaladin because I think we're going to get the mix of super badass Captain Kaladin doing crazy things with amazing like explosions of power and that mental support therapist Kaladin side. So I'm excited to see a mix of the two.
Yeah, I think that's a great point is although therapist Kaladin didn't work the best for me in this book, I'm super excited to see like the hybrid Harold Kaladin. Because I think that's gonna be like, oh, absolutely. Like I saw this thing on Reddit, I think, where it was like if Adolin and Kaladin's reunion is not Kaladin coming up and like announcing himself, I am Kaladin Stormblessed, Herald of the Wind, yada yada, and then all of a sudden Adolin is like, Bridge Boy! Like if that doesn't happen, I'm gonna be so upset.
Like I'm already tearing up imagining that reunion. Like
Oh, it's gotta
it's
happen.
so it has to happen. Otherwise, I'm rioting. Like it is
Literally.
on site.
Yeah. Oh, if anyway, sorry. And this is not about second arc of the Stormlight Archive yet. But that like Kaladin's therapist arc didn't ruin the character for me at all.
No.
It did not drag it down at all. It was just like we've seen a lot of like badass fighter Kaladin, and now we got all it felt therapist, other than he had like I guess one kind of fight scene with Nail. Which the Nail scene did work for me. I don't know if that's a hot take. Um, but the nail scene did work for me. But then going to, I agree, getting the best of both worlds with Harold Kaladin for the future, I think will be phenomenal.
I'm
But
excited.
yeah. Were there any other, I mean, I have a character that's going to stand out to me right now for emotional, of things that really worked and the parts of the character that didn't work for me is Adolin Colin. As he was really good in this book. The one thing is his whole emotional journey for me, at least what resonated the most with me was his conflict with Dalinar. And like even their bickering scene at the beginning, you're just like, oh. And then he Adolin, like, you know, when he gets like smacked down and he's about to die, and I thought he was dying. I thought he was dead in that moment. I thought it was his death scene. And then he was like, not until I see him again. And he uses his peg leg and he kicks and it's like, he says, not until I see him again. He has a realization about Dalinar. That was the most like Stormlight 1 through 4 moment in this book for me. Yeah.
So good. Oh,
Do you have any thoughts on that moment?
honestly, I agree with you. That was so good. And it like breaks my heart that he doesn't get to have that opportunity and that moment. Like it shatters my heart. Like I'm tearing up a little bit just thinking about it. I'm so emotionally invested in these books. It's ridiculous.
Same.
Because listen, like I love my dad and he loves me so much, but I can relate to that little bit of discourse, that disconnect and that internal battle of like, I love you so much, but you've hurt me so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And like being able to forgive that and move forward and be like, I'm going to see you, I'm going to hug you.
Yeah.
Just shatters my heart that he doesn't get to have that moment because that's so huge. I know it's like so sad, but it's so good. And I feel like we might have some really interesting scenes moving forward with Adolin versus Blackthorn. I couldn't remember his name.
Oh my gosh,
like,
I didn't even think about that.
I know. Can you imagine? Oh, I just think it'd be so good. But no, I love Adolin, and I loved his internal conflict of oaths and what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
just finding the root of everything. I just love him. I could talk about Adolin for hours.
Yeah. No, he was so just amazing in this book. And I loved that moment with his dad. One thing that, okay, this is one thing that did not work for me with Adolin is that he never gets to see him again. Like, and I get it's supposed to hurt. I just, you know what I would have loved, and I don't know if this was a possibility, but what happened, like, if they had like a little spiritual moment where but I guess the point is he can't forgive him. I loved everything with Adolin's arc. I don't know.
But no, I'm with you. It hurts that he doesn't get that moment.
You know what? Another thing that I have seen on Reddit, I'm seeing a lot of Adolin stuff on Reddit.
I love Reddit.
What Dalinar was like held Way of Kings everywhere and used that everywhere. Adolin's going to use that with Oathbringer, Dalinar's book.
Stop. Oh. I literally have goosebumps.
Literally, oh my, I just, book 6 through 10, I'm like so excited for, and it's literally going to be 8 years. Anyway, okay, now, were there any emotional beats that also didn't kind of work for you as well?
Honestly, I think to touch on, if you're okay, to touch on Gavinor.
Yeah. Oh, let's
Yeah,
do it.
we're good. We're good.
Oh,
Okay.
let's do it.
So one of the things that didn't really work for me was Gavinor. And like if you think about it, and I was talking to Seth Cosmere Academy about this, he feels so strongly like that this was the most evil possible thing ever. And I feel like that comes from the perspective of being a parent, where you took this child and you did something worse than killing them. Like you completely took away their childhood. You took away their ability to grow and learn and be influenced by the beautiful world around them. And you ended up creating this broken, angry man who knew nothing but all of the negative feelings and all of the anger and all of the hurt. And I really wish that I could have seen that develop. I wish I could have seen what Odium, brainwashed him into thinking about Dalinar. Like the kid saw the one moment of Dalinar beating up Elokar, and I was like, oh, that's gonna hurt. But I didn't take that and be like, oh, that's gonna be a huge majorly defining moment, because if he could have talked through it and he could have seen a little bit more reasoning and how Dalinar had changed and grown, I don't think that would have been there. So I wanted to know what Gavinor was experiencing through that, so that when he came out of it as an adult, like why was he so angry? Like I would be really thrilled if we got a little novella about it, because then I could really understand where that anger and that hurt was coming from to get to the point where he was willing to kill Dalinar.
For sure. For sure. No, and while I do disagree, I do understand where you're coming from, where I think especially like some sort of flashback in the future or like a novella, just to like understand kind of like what went from the sweet little boy that was playing with Lift to, he's ready to murder Dalinar. When I read those pages of who was the champion and it was Elokar, like when it first reveals it as Elokar, my jaw dropped for a second. I was like, what? Yeah.
I
But
loved the idea of it being Elokar. Like, I thought that would have been cool.
yeah.
But I understand why Gavinor was placed where he was, and I can appreciate the moment for what it was because of what it led Dalinar to do. I just wish we had a little bit more. I like epic fantasy for a reason. I like having hundreds of pages to learn about someone.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I love exploring kind of like their past and what they came from and why they are the way they are. Instead of, I will say, and we don't need to get way too into this right now because I have a couple things I want to say about Gavinor, but just kind of like a lot of this book to me, like I know I hate it when people are like, it could have cut like 300, 400 pages or like 800 pages. I don't know. That's like, that doesn't, I don't like it when people say that. What I will say, however, is a lot of this book specifically to me felt different in the fact that I felt really explained with how characters were feeling and why they were feeling that way. And everyone understood their own emotions and understood how to identify those emotions. And everyone was really accommodating. It just like felt very jarring shift from like the people with depression or struggling with depression in earlier books.
Agreed.
And because of that, the Gavinor thing did work for me because it was the one example where it felt like I wasn't explicitly told what the pain was, why he was feeling that pain from what to what. And instead, I'm able to, in my head, interpret the emotions he's feeling. And there's also, now that like I know this happened, there is build up to this moment since Oathbringer. So, I mean, obviously, with Gavinor being tortured as a baby by the Spren or whatever, and then dying with like Elokar holding him as he dies, and then all in Rhythm of War, he's like, I want to train to kill Moash, and I'm like, dude, chill out, you're 4 years old. Like, I'm like,
I forgot
bro,
about
chill.
that. I
Yeah.
forgot about that.
And he's really aggressive. Like he's very Alethi throughout Rhythm of War. And then when we get into Wind and Truth, even when he's talking with Lift at the beginning, and he's like, I want to kill Moash so bad. And I'm like, dude, you're still 4 years old at this point. So I do see that aggression and how when he sees Dalinar kick in Elhokar, I see where he's coming from. I was not a fan of the Gavinor baby theory from the beginning, and I like at least him growing up and wanting to fight Dalinar was a step in a much better direction. I'm so glad.
Agreed. Agreed. That's a really interesting perspective. I did not pick up on those details. So that's really good to know.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
I think it's cool to see that, and I do think Gaviner worked for me. But yeah, I do. My mind just did a blank. I do think there are like emotional payoff moments that like exceed like that. And then, what did you think of the therapist line? Do you know what I'm talking about, or do you need a little more context?
Yes, with Hoyd.
No, well, actually, yes, I have two actually in my mind. That's one of them. And then at the end, when Ishar is like, what are you? What kind of god are you his god?" And Kaladin's like, "I'm his therapist." It felt like a really cool build up to a moment, and then it was undercut by the therapist joke, and I was like, that could have been the equivalent of Honor is Dead, but I'll see what I can do. But it just,
It did fall flat for me. Yeah, it pulled me out of the illusion that is Sanderson's world a little bit. Like, I hate calling things a fan service, but it felt like a fan service. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I don't know. I feel like they could have come up with a different word for it, different way to say it, like rather than just a therapist, because I don't know why. It makes me cringe.
Yeah.
I hate having negative thoughts about these beautiful works of art, but they're bound to happen.
We love the books, by the way.
Yes.
Everybody watching, we love them.
No hate.
Yeah.
No hate. But yeah, it pulled me out of the illusion, and it just was like, oh, that could have been way cooler.
Yeah, no, that line did pull me out. And like I get where it's coming from because Hoyd said it at the beginning, he said it at the beginning of chapter 4. But especially in that moment too, that was a big emotional moment where Kaladin stood up, and I was getting emotional while reading that. I was getting like the emotional buildup, in a way of like, oh, something cool's about to happen. Like when Kaladin stood up, and I just wish there was a cooler line than "I'm his therapist." That could have led to like high emotional moments for me. But that's my thoughts on that line. What is your sentiment on that?
I'm right there with you. It fell so flat. You were set up for something so awesome, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to cap it off on a good thing, what was your favorite emotional moment from the book?
Oh, that's so hard because not necessarily ones that like made me like sob and like break down and cry for days.
Yeah.
But there were two that I really loved that really like were impactful for me. One, and this is going to be everybody's answer, was the Kaladin and Syl scene where she's forming in and out of the spear and they're dancing around, and he's just in that moment where he can just be at peace with everything around him, and he's got his best friend right there with him. And it's completely platonic, which I appreciated. They kept Cal and Syl platonic. I'm not against Syl Aladdin, but I just don't think he's in that space yet. So I love that it was just this genuine, pure, like happy moment. And it was so beautiful. And the second one was closer to the beginning. And we got, I think it was our first couple of flashbacks for Szeth. Also a popular answer, was when Kaladin kind of came out of his own little box of thinking and realized that Szeth was not Kaladin. He was in fact Tien.
Oh yeah, when Kaladin's like, what do you want or whatever, and he's like, I want to stop hurting, or
yeah, and because that just, it was so pivotal, I think, for Kaladin as a therapist to be able to think outside of his own experiences and try and relate himself to everyone around him. And then the part that just topped it all off was Szeth just like breaking down in Kaladin's arms and just crying because he is so tired of all of this pain that surrounds him, and he just wants to escape from it, and he knows that he doesn't want this, but he feels trapped. So those I think were my top two.
Okay, yeah, no, for sure. I agree. And you saying that thing about like Kaladin understanding other people's perspectives as a therapist is really important. I actually think that's also really good. And I like that Kaladin had that and like that he had that voice. And I don't want to get all into this right now, but we see with other characters, I feel like that ultimate understanding of other, like Adolin understanding Shallan, beautiful, love that. Or him admitting that he doesn't understand Shallan and still loves her, that's beautiful.
Yes.
Kaladin understanding other people, that works because that's Kaladin, he's a therapist. But when, like, I just feel like there was some other examples of people understanding how other people were feeling perfectly and understanding how to be accommodating to that, to be the most, like, it just felt like a pivot in what just, it felt like everyone was very happy, I guess. And it's just, it's like, it was, I don't know. There was like a character had, like, the inner monologues felt kind of similar for a lot of the characters for me. But I do like the fact that Kaladin does have that moment still, and that was definitely my favorite Zeth and Kaladin moment from the book as well.
It's
Yeah.
really good.
All right. Well, thank you for taking this time out of your day to have this call. I'm so happy to have you on the video. And yeah, everybody, this is Cosmere Mo. Go check out our Instagram. It'll be in the description down below. And thank you.
Well,
Okay.
thanks for having me.
Oh, shoot, I messed it up. No.
We can start over. It's okay.
Sure.
Cut.
Cut. Cut. All right. So next up, I'm here with Vera, and we're gonna talk about like the 10-day structure of the book and what worked about it, but also kind of why it might not have been the best idea. So, Vera, what do you have to say about the 10-day structure of the book?
Yeah, so in my humble, correct opinion, the book is fine. And when I finished it, if you would have asked me to write out every single thing that happened in it, I would have been like, sure. And on paper, I would have loved probably like 95% of it. But I think that fundamentally, the 10-day structure, at least the way it is implemented in the book, detracts from everything, whether it's character moments, building of tension, pacing. I think pacing is probably the biggest detractor because it just influences everything. And yeah, and I trace it pretty much all back to the 10-day structure. I don't think that it, I don't think that the concept of it was bad per se, but I think the way it was done was bad because instead of feeling a ticking clock, you kind of want to quit because you're like, God damn it. You're
Yeah.
not like, oh no, we only have like 9 days left. You're like, God damn it, we have nine more days that I have to read, you know?
Yeah.
So
Well, I definitely also feel like with the pacing is some of the days like the thing is it didn't feel very like in my mind I don't think of this day like this, like if I'm thinking about events from the book, I'm not thinking day 3 was insane, I'm not thinking day 6 was insane, I'm just thinking, hey, it was pretty cool when Adolin was on the front lines with the pike, I was sobbing during that part, but like I don't know what day that is, and it's essentially like I don't know. It's interesting because this is the first book that has the 10-day structure opposed to the 5-part structure. And the pacing is definitely affected, and I see it a lot. So in your opinion, like how would you describe pacing and how would you describe the pacing of this book?
yeah, before I get there though, what you said was really interesting
Yeah.
that you can't really say, oh, this happened on this day.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge thing. All of the days until maybe like day 9 and 10, just because we get the Tanavast POV. Is this spoilers?
Yes, this is full spoilers, full spoilers.
Oh, thank God. Okay. Like you get the Tanavast POVs. And so
Yeah.
you're kind of, there is that dramatic shift because like, oh my God, you get Tanavast's POV.
Yeah.
But before that point, I can't tell you what happened in any of the days. I can tell you that like in day 1, you get the Chalasi scene, but like that's all I remember because it quite frankly traumatized me. So but other than that, all of them, none of them have anything that differentiates them. And so instead of having, plot point, consequence, you
Yeah.
have blur champion battle. You know what I mean?
Okay, this is giving me actually another good idea, and that's a really good point of I can't differentiate day 4 through and 6. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Kaladin and Zeth are in Shinovar, Adolin's in Azamir, Shallan, Renarin, and Relaine are in the spiritual realm, watching Dalinar and Navani and Gav in the spiritual realm. And it's like, yes, things are happening, but also this, like, like, it's not really changing. Like, I feel like if you look at like some of the other books in the Stormlight Archive, is you get like a big change happens throughout the books. Like, for example, Oathbringer, the beginning, they're at the tower. Then big pivot, they're going to Kholinar. Big pivot, they're at Thaylen Field for the Battle of Thaylen Field. Like, it feels like there's these big pivots between parts, and it almost feels like you have these massive days that are like 100+ pages, and then the next day happens, and like the world hasn't changed. Like, they're doing the same stuff on the next day, you know?
Yeah, and actually tying that into the 10-day structure, something that was kind of going through my head was, would it have been better? Because the way it stands now, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, etc. We get a scene like, oh look, here's Adolin fighting in Azamir and teaching Yanagon some like makeup chess. And then you go over to Sigzil, and Sigzil is once again fighting on the plains. And then you go to, you know what I mean?
Nothing happened with Sigzil's plotline until they were like, we're not going to tell you what's happening anymore. And then it literally just disappeared. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Anyway, but my point is that every single day you get pretty much no progression from any plotline. How much cooler would have been if perhaps day 4 was the big Adolin day, you know, where like stuff's going down in Azamir, and then you're like, oh my god, this is crazy, you know, and then you jump to the next day, and that's the big Sigzil day, you know, and so you can kind of have time to build some emotional investment, you know, and then there's like a big payoff at the end, and then because like the main storyline, I think, in the book, the overarching thing that like we have in the back of our mind is, can Dalinar figure out what happened to Honor, and can he get some information that will help him defeat Taravangian, right?
Yeah.
And so if we would have had that kind of be in every day a little bit, and then every day having like, yeah, like one big core thing that's happening in that day from one of the smaller fronts, I think that would have made it so much more impactful, because you would have been able to be like, oh my god, yeah, that Sigzil day was so crazy, bro. Like, I couldn't believe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But instead, it's just bloated and a blur.
For sure. Yeah. And I definitely, especially like those first like 7 days, basically. I can think of like Adolin lost his leg. That was pretty cool. But other than that, like, it's all kind of a blur in my mind. Yeah. And then also kind of what we're saying like earlier about like pacing is, what would you say like pacing is to you, and how did the pacing work in this book for you, and how is that related to the 10-day structure? So kind of a loaded question.
So I think that the pacing was awful. And so there is this technique that authors use, and it's also very popular in poetry and like wartime poetry, where at the start, perhaps, in slower scenes, or like less, if I don't know, if you're just describing something, but there's not a lot of like intense things going on, authors will use longer sentences, you know, or the lines of the poem will have maybe like 10, 12, 15 words, you know, because that really slows you down as the reader, right? But then when the tension starts building up, things start happening. Then either the sentences become shorter, or sometimes, if we're talking about poetry, the actual line of the poem will become shorter. So it will go from like 15 words to maybe 5, right? And then it creates this effect where before it would, you know, you'd be reading 50 words, but it would just be like 4 lines or 5 lines. But now you're reading 50 words and you're flying through like 2 pages or something like that, you know? And it really involves you in the book, because it creates that feeling of you're just flipping to the next page because you're like, oh my god, I can't believe what's happening. And of course, I think if we take this to the macro scale of 1,300 page book, I think that perhaps, sure, earlier days could have been okay. No, actually, I'm redacting that. I don't think that like day 1 and 2 needed to be that long. There's so much you can cut there, but just in general, I feel like some days could have been a bit longer, or not longer, could have stayed this length.
Yeah.
But then as we start getting to like the more intense battles and stuff like that, the page time should be getting cut because you need to have this feeling of needing to get to the next page. And like not every single day had to be 100 pages. I'm so sorry. They did not.
No, for sure. No, Richard definitely agreed with you. I was talking with them earlier at Tutor Ramble, and he's like, Sanderson's lost his big book privileges. But
I agree.
Yeah, it's the days were a little bit long, and I definitely see what you're saying is the speed at which things are happening felt pretty similar, like in the earlier days as it does near the end. Like just because more things are happening, it feels like it's happening at a similar speed, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it might be because like again, those last days are longer even than the first days. And
Yeah.
again, more things are happening, but I'm sorry, I've been reading, like short classics recently.
Yeah.
And authors like Dostoevsky, or I cannot pronounce the author's name, but the guy that wrote The Ice Palace, he's
For sure.
Norwegian.
Yeah.
Do you see the thickness of this book? This is not even a book. It's 100 pages, okay? Like, are you kidding me?
Compared to
this man over here. I like to think personally that it's the cat that is the author, but this man over
and he
here.
just owns a human.
Oh, yeah. It's like a Ratatouille situation, which is
Yeah,
why
the
the
cat's
cat
the
is
author.
actually on top of the author. Yeah. Secrets I'm revealing, actually. But I've been reading like short books, and I get more emotional pull out of something like this than I did in Wind of Truth, which is crazy to say because I love Dalinar. I've said on my channel that I see myself more in like a 50-year-old war criminal than I do in like, I don't know, 20-year-olds in books. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that's like a crazy thing to say, but
So-
so how is it that I like already characters that I love that I just don't care because I'm like, can we please get to something interesting? You know what I mean?
Oh, did you care about Dalinar's death?
So I knew it was coming, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the one thing. I knew it was gonna happen because you just can't have Dalinar
He's too big of a
in the
character to
next
have in the
book.
second arc. Yeah.
You can't. Yeah. He can't be in the book and not be the main character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like I had a single tear,
Gotcha. Okay.
but
Yeah.
I
I
liked the
didn't
sheep
realize
scene.
he
I cried
died
at
when
the
he died. Like it literally went
What?
that over my head. I know. Well, it like I
That's
saw like I
insane.
understood when like Taravangian was like trying to grab his soul and it slipped through his fingers, and whatnot. But I was like, when he stood up to go protect Gav, I thought we were gonna get another chapter, like one last stand with Dalinar. I didn't realize that was the last stand, and then I missed it, and then I was sad, and yeah. Anyway, so it didn't hit. Anyway, that's sorry. You're talking about Dalinar, and I was like, it didn't. I didn't feel
Yeah,
that.
no,
Yeah.
for me, the most emotional scene was Zeth crying over his sheep. It was
Oh,
so sad. I was like, oh, Sanderson, you got me finally. But I want to just there was something else I just wanted to say. What were we talking about right before this?
yeah.
Dalinar.
Well, we're holding up the big books and the little books and talking about the length, and kind of how the 100+ pages in the first or in the days. First couple days, yeah.
I was gonna say I'm very happy that Navani's out of the picture. That bitch, I hate her. So she wasn't as bad in this book as in the previous ones, but I'm so glad that she's put on hold. So thank God.
She's my fourth favorite character.
Well, it's okay. We can all have bad opinions sometimes.
I just feel so safe when she's on the page.
I
Oh.
don't. I feel violated, actually. So
Oh, I've been a Navani
Fair.
stan since day one. I've been a huge Navani supporter. So agree to disagree on that, I
Anyway.
guess.
She wasn't as bad in this book though. I was like, okay, whatever, shut up, it's fine.
When she
She
had to
wasn't.
walk away with like fake Elhokar screaming after her, and she like
Oh,
took
that was a
Gavin up.
great scene. But
That
it's
was
because I love Elhokar.
Yep, this is true. What do you think? Oh, sorry, but I'm derailing a little bit. But what do you think when Elhokar? It was Elhokar who came out of the portal. Like I was on a plane and I screamed.
Wait, the which portal?
The not the portal. The when it was the contest of champions, and it was like it was Elhokar. That's what I was thinking of.
No, I was like, what? But no. What was like killing me was the fact that I was reading this at my grandparents' house,
Yeah.
and the chapters titles started becoming the death rattles. And I think the first one that I noticed was their dens become our homes, or our homes become their dens, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like,
hold on.
Wait a second. Let me search this up. Sure enough, quote. Yeah. And then it was like the child cries or something.
The suckling
like that,
child or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the man stands over the mountain, or I don't remember. It's something about a child crying, and I was like, it's happening. And my grandma was like, Vera, what are you doing? Calm down. And I'm like, I can't calm down. I've been watching Lost in Discovery for years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All to say, all so that the world knows, like, we do like the book. Yes, we're talking about the 10-day structure, and we're really like dogging on that. But like, come on. I mean, it's Dallin Arkle and Adolin and Zeph and
Renarin and Relaine.
Yep.
Perhaps the second best romance Sanderson has ever written, behind
Stairs and Wax. Stairs and Wax, number
Stairs
one.
and Wax, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I'm a big Yumi fan. I'm not gonna lie. Have you read Yumi the Nightmare Painter?
I read every single Sanderson work in the Cosmere.
Yeah.
I thought it was good, but more so from like the plot and like the mystery aspect. I think that the last chapter undoes everything for me.
Yeah. I really
yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, sorry. I was gonna say, yeah, I really did like the Relaine and Renard. Like I liked a lot of aspects about the book. I will say though, the thing with Relaine and Renard, I don't remember which days was what for their, you know what I'm saying? Like I
don't
feel
think it matters in that case though. You
oh
know
yeah,
what I
like
mean?
for that plot line, 100%.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but actually I was so invested in, because I was so invested in the lore. I loved the the TV in I don't know if you can call it TV, but like, TV and the Cosmere, they're like sitting around, walking around and watching all this stuff from the past unfold before them as if it's like a TV show.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I loved it. And I was so invested. And so I was, every single time I had a Sigil chapter, I was like, I don't care, give me.
That's so real. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I will say the Sigil is the main part that did not work for me, at least plotline wise.
No, neither.
And I
didn't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go for it. What were you
I was just gonna say, I didn't realize, and this is totally on my part, I didn't realize that Vienta was his spread.
What? I can't get over, like, what?
I was like, who is this random Windrunner girl?
When did you realize? When
he renounced his oaths.
It's like 1,000 pages into the book.
I know.
And I'm pretty sure she's been in like Rhythm of War and stuff. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure.
I read Rhythm of War when it came out in like 10 days. So
that's true. Yeah, so that was a while ago. Yeah. Oh yeah.
In Rhythm of War,
Vienta was Zeth's friend. Yeah, but I'm glad you caught on.
I loved that. Oh my god, you broke my mind when you were like, oh yeah, 1 2 1 2 4.
1 2 1 2 4, and the 1 is the A, and the 2 1's the U, and the 24 is the X. Oh my gosh, that's
dude. Crazy. I lost it. I was in Lidl getting my groceries, and I like almost dropped my bag because I was like listening to your video, and I was like, no. And also I was like losing it when the other friend says to 1 2 1 2 4, like, you have to stop being an auxiliary to your human. And I'm like, it's my baby. I love
Ox
so much.
Ox is amazing. Anyway, I think we tackled enough of the 10-day structure and a little bit of extra at the end of that. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute blast to talk to you, and thanks for being on for the episode.
Thank you so much. The last thing I want to say is justice for Yasna. Y'all are haters.
Amen to
Yeah,
that.
thanks for having me on.
I like how we're not gonna go into that. We're just gonna like cut away when you
No.
say justice for Yasna, and
We don't need to explain. We don't.
we don't need to explain.
just
All
know
right,
you're
on to
right.
the next YouTuber. All right, so next up, I'm here with Seth from the Cosmere Academy over on Instagram and TikTok. He does a lot of Cosmere deep dives, lore, Cosmere 101, Cosmere 102. Basically, if you want to know anything about the lore or science of the Cosmere, Seth is your guy.
Thank you.
Do you want to go a little bit into what you were saying about like different criticisms of the book and what your pitch is on everything?
Yeah, it's interesting because this book was a work of art. It was phenomenal. I think pretty much everybody who read it had mostly praise to say about it. But the word mostly is key there, right? I mean, that's not to say the book is without flaw. And what's interesting to me is as I've been talking to different people, it seems like almost everyone has a different negative to say about the book. There's not like a universal, this is what sucked about the book. It's more just everybody had something different or unique that didn't vibe with them personally.
No, that's actually a really good point, which is kind of I'm realizing why I'm making this video is because each person I've talked to has said something like different about what didn't work for them in the book. And some things that didn't work for some people and did work for some people, it's like it's all over the place. Like even looking at like the Yahoo debate versus any different plot line like that, I'm definitely seeing a lot of that. Yeah. So specifically, going by like, did you have any gripes with it? What are your thoughts in terms of you specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I don't know exactly the word for it, right? Pacing doesn't feel right. That's definitely not the right word. But it's the lack of slice of life for me. I mean, The Way of Kings was my favorite of the series, and I think part of that was because we got to really see the day-to-day of these characters, and we got to see who they were in a normal situation. Now, this book, I understand why we didn't have that because the world's ending in 10 days. It's hard to fit in a casual conversation when that huge threat is looming over, right? So I understand the reasoning behind it, but I still missed it. But that's not to say, I mean, Brandon Sanderson was able to fit it in with both Kaladin's plotline and with Adolin's plotline. By the way, sorry, I have spray paint on my hands, so
It's all good.
but I was doing a project for my kid's birthday. But so I mean, with Kaladin and Zeth, we have moments where we see them literally just walking through Shinovar. And as they're walking or flying, we just see them interacting. We see them talking. Zeth has downtime where he just kind of starts talking about his past, and Kaladin just listens. And we see Kaladin's inner dialogue as he's working through these things. With Adolin, we literally see him playing a board game. They have time between battles to sit down and basically play chess with Yanagon. And I think those two things with Kaladin's plotline and with Adolin's plotline to be able to slow down from time to time is what allows me as a reader to connect with the characters. I loved the storylines of all the other characters. I loved Dalinar, I loved Shallan, I loved Yasna, I loved Sigzil, but their plotlines were kind of just foot on the pedal, gas from start to finish.
Yeah.
And for me, that made it harder for me to actually connect with the characters rather than just see them as a progressing plot, like a power that was just pushing the book, which isn't a bad thing from a narrative standpoint, but it was a little harder for me.
No, yeah, for sure. And I definitely get what you're saying with like the slice of life and being able to just kind of live in the moment. Because I think these books are pretty big if you didn't notice. And I think a beautiful part of that is we get to get so much more attached to our characters. I'm a big advocate of this is not to talk about Mistborn, but I do not like the Well of Ascension, but I know I would not like Hero of Ages if it wasn't for the Well of Ascension. Like Hero of Ages is my favorite, and it's because we get that downtime.
I've never heard anybody say it that way, but as soon as you said it, my brain was like, "Whoa, he's so right."
I know. I realized it when I finished reading like the trilogy. I'm like, I loved Hero of Ages, but the downtime of the characters is what gets me like emotionally attached to them. And I think with each different Stormlight book is we get to see like a new like section of their life, except for Rhythm of War. That one just feels like a story. But at least with the first three books, it feels like we're seeing a different like chunk of their life, and they're in a very different
Hmm.
environment. And just to see how they're, going through this in the day to day. And you were right when you said Adolin and Kaladin gets a lot of that. And I think where we don't get that is like in Dalinar especially. And
Yeah.
I've seen people say online that Dalinar's plot line was like didn't work for them, like it was just an exposition dump. And I'm like, that's what he was in books 1 and 3. Like we this isn't like new. And I think what
Right.
you made me realize is I think there's a relationship between the fact that yes, we always got like him in these visions, but this is the first book where he doesn't get a break from that, you know?
Yeah. And I've heard people complain about, like, especially with Dalinar's story, right? Is we don't see Dalinar struggling with really anything until basically the very end, basically day 10.
Yeah.
Days 1 through 9 with Dalinar. And I don't know if I 100% agree, right? I'm just telling you what I've heard. Is days 1 through 9 Dalinar is basically things happening to him,
Yeah.
and we only get 1 day of him actually acting. And I see where they're coming from. There is some truth to that.
Yeah. And yeah, no, for sure. I definitely like the like because this vision side of Dalinar we've seen before, but what differentiates it is his entire plot line is a vision. Whereas in Oathbringer,
Right.
yes, he would have these, well, I guess I'm thinking of the flashback chapters, but in Way of Kings, where he'd have these visions, and he'd see all these things. And he goes into the visions with Navani and Yasna and Oathbringer, but I can't remember how much of that book is flashbacks or of visions. But the point of that being is
Yeah.
I think why it specifically didn't work in this book, where it like works great in The Way of Kings, is those what you're saying of there's no action that he's taking because he's constantly in this, in
Right.
the
Yeah. He's kind of almost being dragged through it,
yeah.
which, I mean, he does have choice, right? We do see him. He has a very tangible, oh man, what's the word? Not fight. Wow, I can't think of the word, but
Argument?
a struggle against the Stormfather
Yeah.
the entire book, right? It's a very tangible tension between Dalinar and the Stormfather, as the Stormfather's trying to prevent him from continuing, and he's pushing forward anyway. And I think that is important to remember, that there is struggle, there is action, there is decisions,
Mhm.
but it does at times feel like it gets lost in all the visions. And I think the same thing happens with Sigil, right? We
Yeah.
see him, and he very much has to make on the fly decisions about the battle, about the strategy, how to save his friends, where to go. And we see him, especially with, Moash showing up, there's a very tangible tension there. But at the same time, for me, it's because it was fight, 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 fight with
Yeah.
Sigil. We never really saw a moment where Sigil had any chance to slow down at all. Which I get, like I said, it was kind of the point. The world is ending. There's not really time
Yeah.
to just sit down, have a pot of stew, and tell stories over a campfire.
Mhm.
But I missed it. I missed that
Yeah.
in a lot of the book.
For sure. And I definitely see like where you're coming from on that. And with I think especially we see with, the Venli and Sigil plotline, especially I mean it literally was just a battlefront the whole time. Whereas I feel like Adolin's plotline,
Hmm.
like what you mentioned earlier, was it kept bringing like they went from chess and then literally to him like holding up the shield and the pike, and like there was a good balance of it there. So I definitely
Yeah.
see where you're coming from that. Are there any other plot lines that have that gripe that stick out to you, or was there anything else about the book or anything at all?
Um, I mean, like I said, it was a work of art. We're talking kind of negatives here, right? I mean, that's the point of the video, but the book was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I haven't actually thought about where I would rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, but it's probably at least an 8,
Okay.
right? Probably higher than that. I loved the book. It was amazing. Some other, I mean, specifically the Tanavast chapters, I personally felt that they were way too dumpy. I did not feel like I was in the book. I felt like I was just reading. Yeah, it was a Coppermind entry, right? It was like reading the Coppermind, which I love doing. I spend hours
No, I
on
was
the
gonna say, is it?
Coppermind.
I feel like that's right up your alley. I was gonna say, I feel like that's your
It
second
is,
home.
but when I'm in the story, I want to feel in the story.
Yeah.
Outside of the story, yeah, give me all the information. I will devour it and swallow it. But in the story, I want to feel the emotions. And the Tanavest chapters just kind of felt like here's a textbook of information, here's a history lesson, rather than here's the emotions, here's the struggles, here's the plots that's going on.
Yeah.
So I don't know, the Tanavest chapters didn't really vibe for me.
For sure. And I think that's interesting because it's the first time I feel like we've gotten an info dump from a direct POV throughout history, where before, if information like this was going to be dumped, it was usually in a vision or some other sort like that, where we had physical
Yeah, or like
people.
the epigraphs, like the way, or the Final Empire epigraphs, right? Where they're trying to figure out what was this journal and stuff.
Yeah.
We're piecing it together. And I actually mentioned that to my wife. I forgot about this till just now. The second Tanavest chapter.
Yeah.
I literally we listened to the audiobook together, and I hit pause and I turned to her and I'm like, Brandon's taken away some of the fun. I Part of the fun is to be able to get the tidbits and get the puzzle pieces and put the puzzle pieces together. It's
Yeah.
not quite as fun when Brandon just hands you the completed puzzle and says, "Here, look, there it is." I'm like, "Aw, but I wanted to put it together."
Yeah. No, for sure. Definitely agree in the sense of it felt like jarring almost. Like it felt like there was definitely a shift where the fact that it was just the info and the info was dumping, and I feel like there wasn't like did that contribute to the climax? Am I forgetting something? Or other than like we know that the power of honor is in stuffed away, or not stuffed away, but just existing. But did like
It
Dalinar
didn't.
was Dalinar like I used X information to do this? Or was it literally just an info dump?
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought about that. That question had literally not come into my head yet, so I'm trying to
Yeah,
think.
it just came into my head. That's why I said it. Yeah.
I Off the top of my head, I cannot think of any new information that Dalinar received in the visions that directly impacted the climax.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
Other than honor exists and is semi-sentient, right? But those two pieces of information didn't come until the end of the extended vision sequence.
Yep. Yeah. I remember that. I actually remember when you were reading through that, you were messaging in the Discord and you were like all these revelations you were having about the Stormfather and Dalinar. And it was just or the Stormfather and Honor. And all you were like
Yeah.
avatars. And it was funny to watch like all your theories and all the updates that you were
It
saying.
was crazy. I mean, the Stormfather, we knew he was something akin to a cognitive shadow, right? And I
Yeah.
had been calling him a cognitive shadow for a long time, just for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And in preparing for the Cosmere 401 panel, we spent a lot of time discussing and trying to study and figure out what was going on with the Stormfather. Not once in any of those conversations did the word Avatar ever come up. We never even thought about it.
Yeah. And now that's officially what he is, right?
Yeah, yep, he's an Avatar.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. I do love that reveal. Like I love it I love those chapters the same way I love going into the Coppermind and just like scrolling and figuring all these things out.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see that in a you know, in a
In the book, in the middle of the story. And I was talking to, I think I was actually on with Cosmere Mo,
yeah.
and we were saying how those chapters would have felt significantly better if just briefly there was moments of cutaway where you see Dalinar and the Stormfather interacting. Even something as simple as Dalinar saying like, "Oh, really? That's what happened?" And the Stormfather saying, "Yes, now hush." Even something silly and stupid like that would have made me feel more like I was still in the story and not watching something external.
Because it didn't feel like we were like correct. That's a really good way of putting it. Because I remember being like, is Dalinar seeing all of this exactly? What information is Dalinar getting from this? And I definitely
Right.
I love that standpoint where you're coming at. It did just feel a little bit removed, especially considering like Odium is just a completely different vessel at this point. Tanavast is gone, and it's like the only character I guess that's still the same is Biodo Mishram and Core. So it's definitely like
Yeah.
there's definitely a disconnect there. Okay. Awesome. Well, I think that's all that we need for this discussion, but thank you so much for coming on
Cool.
this episode. It was a blast to have you here and to discuss Wind and Truth.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
In conclusion, I think this is definitely not the best book in the series, but I also think there's definitely reasons why it's not doing well. There's definitely something that feels different about this book, and some of the plotting really works, and some of the plotting doesn't work. Likewise, most of the prose doesn't really work, at least not for me. My biggest takeaway from having all these interviews was what Richard was saying about the sensitivity writers and how every single person had the same inner dialogue and there was not much character conflict. I definitely thought that was really interesting, and I see why they like Yasuna so much. But ultimately, the book is up for you to decide how you feel about it. If you love this book, love this book. If you hate this book, hate this book, but don't bash other people for having a different opinion than you. Unless it's me, because I can take it, I guess. We're all just a bunch of people sitting down and reading books that are really freaking big. If you want to see my solo review for Wind and Truth, you can check that out right here and subscribe to see future Cosmere content. Hey, if you stuck around this long, shout out to you. I hope you liked the video. Thanks for being here. Okay, bye.